We're going to make this one just quick, short and sweet video about Dominion, Sequoia, and Smartmatic. Election software, electronic voting software used by most of the United States, particularly Dominion, but their ties to Smartmatic are important, even though Dominion has made multiple claims that there are no ties and that they have nothing to do with Smartmatic. And Smartmatic has made multiple claims that they have no ties to any of this, nor do they have any ties to George Soros, which I think a lot of people at this point are starting to realize has his claws into just about everything. Let's start at the very beginning, right? So Sequoia Voting Software is this company that's over in California, or started there anyway. Smartmatic started with founders from Venezuela that had either fled or what have you to the United States. But it was backed by the Venezuelan government. There have been contributions made to affiliate companies of Smartmatic. Bitsa is one of them, to the tune of $200,000+, which were made allegedly by the Venezuelan regime. There aren't many degrees of separation between these companies. Now, you have claims in the news right now that Dominion and Smartmatic have no ties to one another. They are not involved with one another. But at the same time, they release on their own website that they have done business with Smartmatic. One of those incidents that they cite are 2009 election in the Philippines. And if you go digging and you look into the election in the Philippines, you will see there was controversy surrounding that election in 2009 in the Philippines. But then you have Dominion releasing a statement on their website that the Associated Press has verified that Dominion has no ties to Venezuela. But that is the issue, is that they're lying by omission. Dominion itself does not have ties to Venezuela. However, Dominion purchased Sequoia software from Smartmatic. Smartmatic has ties to Venezuela. So now you need to find out how many of those ties to Venezuela moved to Dominion with that acquisition. Here's the next claim. Dominion is not and has never been owned by Smartmatic. That's true. That's true. But Dominion did buy software from Smartmatic, and the Sequoia team came with it. Based on other articles that you read, the team with Sequoia, that management team, that operational team, they came with Sequoia. So they didn't just buy the rights to the software. They essentially acquired the entire company, that branch of Smartmatic, and then they leveraged it in their operations. So essentially they took a big chunk of Smartmatic and said, hey, you're with us now. So this is kind of another lie by omission there, but it's also they're misinterpreting what people mean, and they can claim that it's not true by saying Dominion has never been owned by Smartmatic. Okay. And here are their statements. Dominion is an entirely separate company and a fierce competitor to Smartmatic. Dominion and Smartmatic do not collaborate in any way and have no affiliate relationships or financial ties. Dominion does not use Smartmatic software. Well, it's because they bought it, right? We got that by now, right? We understand that they bought it. The only associations the companies have ever had were, in 2009, Smartmatic licensed Dominion machines for use in the Philippines, and the contract ended in a lawsuit. Don't you wish that Dominion, their website, don't you wish that they would have a link so you could review the lawsuit? You have to go chasing down that rabbit hole to find out that this election that they're referring to in 2009 in the Philippines was ripe with potential fraud, and people were not happy. In 2010, Dominion purchased certain assets from Sequoia, a private U.S. company. Smartmatic, a previous owner of Sequoia, pursued legal actions against Dominion. Sure. But I'd love to know more about the legal actions. And when they say that they purchased it from a U.S. company, that's because Sequoia had been sold off to the U.S. elections company or some other company based in the U.S. It was only briefly held by that company before it ended up in the hands of Dominion. So, okay. I believe in around 2007 or so, that asset was sold to the United States-based company, and by 2010, it was acquired by Dominion. So there was only a brief stint in which that was owned wholly by a U.S. company. Then they make the claim that no unauthorized or last-minute software updates occurred. Claims about software updates being done the night before the election day are 100% false. Our voting systems are designed and certified by the U.S. government to be closed and do not rely on network connectivity.
DEF CON is an annual hacker conference. We were there specifically to attend something called the Voting Village, which is something that's gone on for 3 years. And in this, its third year, they had assembled some of the most common voting machines in the country. What was so interesting was I assumed coming into it that the big manufacturers, companies like ES&S and Dominion, had provided these machines to the hackers to, field test them. But no, it turns out there's an extremely hostile relationship there, and that ES&S and Dominion and other companies have basically said, we don't want to participate. And yet here these kids were who had opened it up. They said, look, you can pop the front off of it, and here's a port you can get into right here. That's easy. All kinds of stuff that you could certainly do within 6 minutes behind a curtain, much less if you had extra time because any of these were connected to the web, as we discovered a couple of days before. So many of them are. So
this equipment can be easily accessed on the fly and manipulated in under 6 minutes. And then right at the end of the piece, they make mention of how many of these systems, although they are supposedly not connected to the internet, are. Their voting systems are designed and certified to be closed and do not rely on network connectivity. But they don't say that they're not connected to the network. That's another, it's just they're leaving that little piece out. They give you enough to make you say, oh, I guess there's no way it could be hacked at all. But then they show right here that it can be. And in that expose, they talk about how you can gain access to different ports of the internals of these systems relatively quickly. And if you bring a device that allows you to connect through that port, if you were a hacker and you were prepared for obviously what you came to do, then you could get in and get out having done what you needed to do in 6 minutes. Now, mind you, these are experts. Like, I'm not going to be able to jump in there and hack that thing in 6 minutes, nor do I want to, but there are people that can do it. There are people that they probably have competitions about this to see who can hack this kind of stuff faster. So let's move on. So this press release here is from 2007 by Representative Carolyn Maloney of New York. And the headline of this article or this press release is Smartmatic announces sale of Sequoia voting systems. Okay, so now you're seeing it's coming together, right? So what I said was that Sequoia voting systems was owned by Smartmatic. It was sold to a wholly owned U.S. company briefly, and I mentioned 2007, and then it was then acquired by Dominion in 2010. So it only spent 3 years as a U.S.-owned asset, and now it's not anymore. Once again, let's start from the top here. So, come on, website. In Washington, Smartmatic, the voting machine firm with ties to the Venezuelan government, today announced that it is divesting ownership of the voting machine company Sequoia Voting Systems. Congresswoman Carolyn Maloney shined the congressional spotlight on the Sequoia purchase last year by Smartmatic because it posed serious national security concerns about the integrity of our elections. Last year, Smartmatic decided to sell Sequoia rather than complete an investigation by the Committee on Foreign Investment in the United States, the government entity charged with ensuring the safety of foreign investments in the United States. So, isn't that kind of funny? They were about to be investigated, and rather than allow it to go through and then keep it on the up and up, they fucking sold it. And, they're going to catch us. Get rid of this shit. And so they did. They sold it to another company. That other company held it briefly and then sold it to Dominion. So all it was a couple of changes of hands so that lawsuits couldn't take place. Companies do this all the time. If they find that bad crap is happening and they need to get out, they will sell off assets to other companies that they don't hold majority ownership in, And then all those penalties and consequences of whatever they were trying to run from essentially go away, unless they can be deemed as individually culpable for the offenses being investigated. But if it's just on a corporate level and it's being held, it's, you know, the claims are being levied against the corporation and not individuals within it, then essentially it all gets erased. Maloney goes on to say, the integrity of our voting machines and elections is vital to national security. Given all of the past uncertainty and anxiety surrounding electronic voting, it's nice that voters will have this added reassurance when they enter the voting booth this election day. Smartmatic was the subject of controversy in 2004 when the Hugo Chavez-led Venezuelan government selected it to provide the voting machine systems for the presidential recall election. Even though it would have been the company's first time providing machines for an election, Smartmatic teamed up with a Venezuelan software company, Bitsa, which at the time was 28% owned by Chavez's government. Get the... They're not even... I mean, it's Venezuela. They're not even trying to hide it. But now these people are in our elections, not by Smartmatic, right? It's not Smartmatic. It's Sequoia, which was Smartmatic. Let's go back. All right. In 2005, a Chicago city alderman questioned the possible ties between Sequoia and the Venezuelan government when that company's machines were used in the March 2006 Chicago primaries. And then Maloney says, when I first raised concerns about the Smartmatic case with the U.S. Treasury Department, I knew it was ripe for a CFIUS investigation. There were just too many questions and lingering doubts, which Smartmatic was clearly unable to overcome. Probably why they sold it. Get this away from us as fast as possible. At first, Smartmatic flatly refused to undergo the CFIUS review. It eventually agreed to a review, but later dropped out of the review process and announced its intent to divest of Sequoia. Quote, the Smartmatic case reinforces the importance of a strong CFIUS review system. That's why I worked hard to pass this new CFIUS reform this year that encouraged safe foreign investment in the United States without jeopardizing our nation's security. Added Maloney, end quote, added Maloney. So I think it's safe to say, good on Maloney for identifying this and bringing it to people's attention. Although, what did it do? It didn't stop this from eventually causing mayhem in this 2020 election. But we knew this was a problem in 2007. How funny is it that we're being told by Dominion that they have no ties to Smartmatic, and then you read an article about Smartmatic and how they're being investigated for fraud and malfeasance and their connections to the Venezuelan government. And rather than go through that investigation and that review and come out on top, instead they jumped way out of the way of that, sold the company and sold Sequoia to a different company, a U.S. company, which then sold Sequoia to Dominion. So they are in fact tied to one another. So now we have that, right? So Sequoia, Smartmatic, Dominion. They are not one company, but Sequoia is the rope that ties them together. Here's the kicker. So now, like I said, there was a U.S. company that briefly owned Sequoia after 2007, before it was then sold to Dominion. So now we have an article in the Huffington Post, exclusive. On heels of Diebold Premier purchase, Canadian eVoting firm Dominion also acquires Sequoia, and then lies about Chavez ties in the announcement. And then it says, intellectual property of voting systems still owned by firm linked to Venezuelan president, despite press statement to the contrary. Canadian-based Dominion Voting Systems has quietly announced its second acquisition of a major U.S. voting machine company in the past months, and right out of the gate, they've lied about it. Not an auspicious beginning for the company, which may now virtually overnight have become the dominant private e-voting machine company in the country. And pretty much the world, them and Smartmatic, they operate outside of the U.S. We're not their only customer, and that's important to consider because the ties to Venezuela, and then also their ties to the Philippines, which I mentioned before, where that election process was ripe with fraud, and the people of the Philippines were not happy. That was a complete shit show. Are we not seeing that this shit is not good? I mean, there is a trail of breadcrumbs of legal action against these companies for just horrible things. And now these are the people, these are the companies that represent us in our election process. How are we allowing this to go on? I understand that now we're questioning it, but we should be trying to move away from e-voting and just start going to in-person voting with identification to verify that everyone's who they say they are, and minimize the potential for fraud or meddling, if you will, by these culprits here. So now we know this. Smartmatic and Sequoia have ties to Venezuela through their other software affiliate, Bitsa. Then it becomes a shit show. They're under investigation, so they sell it off before they can be found treasonous or something. They sell it off before people can find out what they've been doing. And it goes to Diebold Premier, or ES&S, which then is forced to divest because of the ties to Venezuela, but also because of other wrongdoing by the high-ranking officials in those companies. So then they're forced to divest. And boom, now Dominion has it. And here's my last one. And this is just because Peter Neffinger, the president of the board, chairman, whatever he's calling himself now for Smartmatic. Now, mind, like I said, Smartmatic ties to Venezuela, ties to Dominion, ties to them all, but they deny all of these ties. But Smartmatic has also allegedly been tied to George Soros. Now, you can't tie them directly to George Soros, just like you can't tie Smartmatic directly to Dominion, because it's gone through a couple hands, right? But Smartmatic got caught in their lie about not being tied to George Soros. And the Gateway Pundit released an article this year, only a few days ago, and it's titled, Smartmatic Lied. Lord Mark Mullock Brown admitted to license agreement between Smartmatic and Dominion in 2015. Smartmatic, a UK-based company, is a George Soros-linked company that has provided voting technology in 16 states, including the battleground states of Arizona, Colorado, Florida, Michigan, Nevada, Pennsylvania, and Virginia. The chairman of Smartmatic is Lord Mark Mullock Brown. This is such an ominous name. Okay. He sits in the British House of Lords and on the board of George Soros' Open Society Foundation. It's right there, people. I only dug into this last night. Literally, my wife was pissed, trying to talk to me, and I'm like, yeah, I'm sorry, I'm reading. All this stuff, I mean, you can go down the rabbit hole in one night, and you can come up with, just buckets of odd coincidences, things that tie these people and organizations together when in the face of the public, they deny any connections whatsoever. You need to be informed. You need to do some research. If you don't want to do some research, follow me and send me suggestions of things that you're interested in. I will dig in. I always do. I might come up right. I might come up wrong. Who knows? I try not to make too many claims of being correct on things until I've done a decent amount of research. So my claim here is not to say that fraud is the reason why Joe Biden may win the election. I think, and as the media would deny, they try to say there was not widespread voter fraud. But it doesn't have to be widespread. It would have been targeted, right? Because you just need to win the swing states. So maybe fraud or impropriety or double counted votes. There are so many things that could have caused this election to go one way or the other, and cause the United States to deem one candidate the president who didn't actually win. So I'm not saying that the e-voting machines are what may have caused something like that, but I'm just saying that they're tied to some sketchy shit. Dominion is tied to Sequoia, which they bought from a U.S. company after they had to divest from it because of the ties to Venezuela, which was the same reason why Smartmatic unloaded that thing before. It's almost like Sequoia and its ties to Venezuela are, it's like someone's throwing around, it's like a hot potato, trying to just keep it moving so you can't keep track of it. So there's potential there. And then you have the high-ranking officials at Smartmatic, you have high-ranking officials at Dominion, you have people in the mainstream media, they're all just outright denying it. Meanwhile, there's evidence to the contrary that says that there have been fraud, impropriety, and connections to, dictatorial regimes like that of Venezuela. And then also cases like the Philippines, where their 2009-2010 general election was claimed to have been defrauded, and there's controversy surrounding that election. And guess who served as the eVoting contract for that? It was Dominion and Smartmatic. I can't remember who was the prime and who wasn't, but those two together, Dominion provided the machines, Smartmatic provided the software. I believe that's how it went. So they're tied to fraud, they're tied to dictators, they're tied to investigations where they bail and sell this asset and then move on. Just smoke and mirrors, don't look here, and then the mainstream media is just with them every step of the way. And then just that last little sprinkle on top is that Smartmatic is, through Moloch Brown, tied to George Soros, because Moloch Brown serves on the Open Society Foundation. So call it a conspiracy, call it what you want, but you can dig in and you can find this information until they scrub it, probably. So just be aware. None of this is on the up and up. Whether or not it rigged the election, who knows? But hopefully by next election, we've figured this stuff out and we've made rules and regulations to prevent this from happening again, so that we can once again have faith in our election process. I'm Alex with LWS. Thanks again for tuning into my video. If you haven't already, please like, subscribe, hit the notification bell. I don't make any money from this. This is just me ranting about things that I find to be odd in our culture, in the world, and how they impact our lives, and I just decide to talk about them. I always do my research, or at least I try, where I can find information. And so, like I said, like, subscribe, hit the notification bell, and I'll see you next time for the next video. Thanks.